What do you think of the parents that kick their kids out as soon as they have turned 18 years old? I can't imagine having to deal with that. My dad lost a place to live at his parents' house for the summer his last year of college, and luckily my mum's parents let him stay in their basement. From what my parents told me, my dad was devastated by this. My parents' rule was we would have a place to stay without paying rent as long as we were in school or after we graduated while we were getting our first job. I really appreciated their support and not needing to worry about housing during the summers while I was in college. We'll be doing the same with my 3 kids. Brother was out before 18 and I was out at 18, and my dad didn't even have a funeral. Should tell you about all you need to know about parents who kick their kids out ASAP. Kicking out your kid as soon as you're legally allowed to do so tells me you wanted them out of the house even earlier, and the only reason you didn't do it is because you didn't want to be arrested. Welp, I was kicked out at 16 and again at 18. My mother had no ambitions for work and decided the low to zero income way of life was a good choice to raise 3 kids. Addictions and mental disorders OFC. Anyhow, she demanded $500 per month from me while I was in high school. At the time, a full-time job at minimum wage would net you about $300 weekly. Needless to say, I first had to drop out of school to work full-time to pay her that. Eventually I got back into school, cut back on and quit jobs until I was part-time and could actually attend school. This caused money to stop coming in. This caused her to be angry. This caused me to become homeless. So now when she asks for help or simply wants to talk to me and I don't reply, well, there you go. There were many other things involved, but if you are a D to your kids, they will be a D to you when they are adults. Rightfully so. Yes, I'm now a parent, and no, under no circumstances would I do what she did. Was one of those kids. Haven't spoken to my parents in over 10 years. Have no intention on speaking to them anytime in the future either. I was 17, a semester away from graduating. My evangelical parents found some weed in my brother's room. I woke up early on a school morning to the sound of my father angrily throwing mine and my brother's things out of the house and out into the yard. He and I spent the next 5 years homeless, at best sleeping on a friend's floor, at worst sleeping on concrete sidewalks exposed to the element and the worst in people. I'm 34 now and off the streets almost a decade now, but it forever changed the course of my life for the worse. And worst of all, my brother was never able to recover. He took his life almost a year ago. My parents divorced for a second time about a year after kicking us out. My father almost immediately remarried. I later found out that he had put his stepson through college and paid his rent while we were eating out of dumpsters. That was probably the most painful thing I ever had to absorb and internalize. I think some people are even potentially able to self-sustain in that situation, albeit a very small percentage. But to shelter your kids completely and not give them the skills to survive and then abandon them is abuse in my eyes. They are not Italian, that's for sure. Here in Italy, when the child is finally ready to leave the house at the age of 35, the family gets together to bid them a tearful goodbye before they move 1 kilometer away from their parents' house. Close bracket. My BF got kicked out at 18 and his parents literally said to his face, "Since you were an accident and we didn't mean to have you, we need you out of the house now so we can actually relax like we used to before you were born." Anyway, I think extremely badly of them. I was one of those kids. The rule in my house was you were out by 18 unless you were still in high school. In that case, you were out on graduation day. Edit the demands of life calls. But I will answer each of you. Great candidates for a nursing home in their later years. Dad didn't want to have kids. Once we were 7 or 8 years old, my mother pretended to still like us, but she didn't seem to. Had more independent personalities. I believe that many past generations had children more out of obligation than out of a genuine desire to be parents for the rest of their lives. It's an absolutely horrible way to start a life. My older brother was a complete narcissistic asshole. He would hit me often and told me if I told my parents He would kill me. He was constantly causing problems with my parents. My father told him that on his 18th birthday, he could have breakfast in the house, but his lunch was going to be on the front porch in a paper bag. So pack a suitcase. My father was true to his word. One of the greatest days of my life. I went to school with some people like that. Immediately kicked out at 18. How can they expect to continue their education when they now have to immediately start making enough for food and shelter? Inevitably, most got married and divorced, or at least pregnant young too. Now 20 years later, the ones I'm friends with on Facebook are continuing the vicious cycle by kicking their kids out at 18. Come on bro, give them a chance. And you complain your family doesn't have generational wealth. This is why. My parents are foster parents. They're my bio parents, but they've been doing foster care all my 30 years of life, and they don't kick out the foster kids when they turn 18. When children's aid stops supporting them, usually at 18, my parents step up and help the kids until they can comfortably move out, or until they want to. They have a 25 years old still living with them because she fears abandonment and my parents don't want her to leave lol. They love each other. My parents helped out over 20 kids throughout my life to try to become successful human beings, no matter how long it takes. Many of them are still in contact with us. We took them in and loved them. How can parents who raised their own children kick them out just because they reached adult status? I just don't get it lol. It's terrible. My fiance's birthday is the 26th of December, a day after Christmas. On his 18th birthday he was told by his father he was now an adult and had to go. No warning or anything. He had to move into his car that same week. And yet, 25 years later, his father has the audacity to continuously ask us for money to pay his bills. Guess who's going to the shitty nursing home? Generally speaking, I'd say those parents don't understand the reality of the current economic landscape and that, unless they made a Herculean effort, they probably didn't set their kid up properly to do well. Not to mention that during most of history, and in the vast majority of cultures, leaving home at 18 just was not a thing. You generally stayed at home until you married, whatever age that may be, and even after you might still live with your parents, or even if you have your own home it'd be very closely connected, often still working the same land together, etc. The idea that people are supposed to move out at 18 and make it on their own when they're still 4 to 6 years from full mental development BTW is by far the exception rather than the rule historically. My dad did a bit differently. His rule was I had to be doing something. I got 90 days to figure it out. If I'm in college/school, I lived with them for free. Once I started working, it was $400 a month to stay. My dad basically framed it as you can save money here as long as you want. But when you want to get your own place you're welcome to do so. You will always have a place here. They should have bought a dog or they want the thing gone by 18. They are shitty parents. My daughter is going to be 18 tomorrow. This world is difficult enough for full grown humans. Why do that to a young adult? It depends on the kid. We kicked out our daughter because she became violent and attacked my wife. Our son is welcome to stay until he is ready to leave. They're setting up their kids for failure. Harsh, but true. I'm no kids by choice, but if I ever were to have a kid, I'd do my best to provide the best for them. What that means in this situation, I live in a HCOLPNW city, is that I'd make it known to my kid that they are more than welcome to stay at home while going to college and working so they can save up $ instead of paying off someone else's mortgage via rent. Rent for an old one bedroom in my city goes for $2,200. Best to stay home and save up equity. Edit. It also speaks to the type of parent these people are. Parenting doesn't suddenly stop at 18. This is also a particularly Canadian/American thing, whereas immigrant and or first generational families typically have multi-generational households. They don't want to have relationship with their children. They are terrible parents who will likely end up in a state-run nursing home. If you have a child, your goal is to make sure your child has every tool to succeed in life before they go out on their own, regardless if that is 18, 23. 25 plus my plan is, once my child hits 18 I will ask them to pay me a small rent amount, like 20% of a normal 1-bed apartment rent, monthly, but I will be putting it all into a separate bank account, and once they decide it's time to move out I'll give all of it back to them as a gift. They will always have a place to stay with me if things get tough as well. My mum kicked me out at 16 when I got advice to go on her independent youth benefit. They had to contact my mum to basically say she didn't want me. She turned round and said that I can come back whenever I want. So I was denied financial support. Then I found out she had moved to another island. I don't talk to her much. My parents were divorced for at least a decade before I turned 18. But my dad was still trying to force my mom to kick me out at 18 with no place to live. This was interesting considering my dad's mom bought him a house to live in after he turned 18. I swear the guy wanted to make my life as miserable as he could. Even though his parents spoiled him, he still rubs in my face how much my grandparents gave him while refusing to give me a penny and expecting me to feel sorry for him. Have to love narcissistic alcoholics and the never-ending mindset of a selfish 16-year-old in a boomer's body. Asshole move emo. They're fools, selfishly setting up their children for a life of unnecessary hardship and struggle.